Here we have verse 14 of the 5th chapter of the Gospel of John. Jesus has found the man who he had healed, who was there by the little pool in Jerusalem, 38 years in a situation of being paralyzed and unable to help himself, and now he has been made whole, and we have a later conversation that takes place between Jesus and the man when Jesus finds him in the temple. Meta, preposition, in this case taking the accusative, which means after. Meta tauta, these things. This is the demonstrative pronoun, neuter, plural, accusative. The fact that it says after these things rather than after this may suggest that it's been some time, maybe 2 or 3 days or more, from the time that the healing took place until the time that Jesus found this man in the temple. The after these things at least implies that there may have been a little bit of an additional passage of time. Heuriske, this is from heurisco, I find. This is the third person singular, present active indicative. Heuriske, I find, is the meaning of it. He finds, in this case, because it's third person, him, auton, the man who had been healed. The one doing the finding, of course, Jesus in the nominative case, so Jesus finds him. The present is used here, giving a little bit of additional energy to the discussion. So after these things, Jesus finds him in, preposition takes the dative, to, definite article, dative, masculine, or dative neuter actually in this case, singular, in to hiero, in the temple. Hieron is the word for temple that means the entire temple structure, as opposed to neos, which refers to the inner sanctum of the temple. So he finds him there in one of the courts of the temple, kai apen, and he says, this is the third person singular, aorist active indicative of lego, second aorist, of course, in form. So in the temple, he finds him and said, auto, pronoun, dative, singular, masculine, and says to him, ide. This is kind of an interjection. It's the idea of behold or look or something like that, kind of without any clear sort of conjugation to it. Behold, hugies. This is a word we've seen before. It basically means to be whole, and in this case, of course, applies to the man in terms of being healed. And then gegonos. This is from genomai, I become. This is the second person singular, and it's the perfect active indicative, so you have become whole. The fact that it's in the perfect suggests that he'd been healed sometime prior and continues to be in a state of being whole or being healed in the present moment. So the perfect gives a certain degree of permanence to the idea, and yet at the same time we have the following warning. Meketi, no longer. Uketi and meketi both mean no longer, but meketi is used with non-indicative moods, as is the case here. No meketi hamartane. This is the present, second person, singular, imperative. So no longer sin. Hina, in order that. Hina takes the subjunctive. In this case, the subjunctive is over here another form of genomai, in this case in the subjunctive. In order that me keron soy. Keron is an adjective. It is comparative in nature, meaning something like a worse or a more difficult situation. The te here is an indefinite pronoun. It means something. Something might befall you, might happen to you, which was actually worse than what you had gone to before. So the warning to the man, do not sin, in order that some worse thing does not befall you. It does, of course, invite a certain degree of speculation as to what exactly led Jesus to make such a warning to this man. We know that it doesn't necessarily follow point for point that a sin leads to an illness or a sickness or something of that order, and yet in this case the very fact that Jesus puts the warning to him in those terms, and speaks of a worse thing. Well, it's hard to imagine a worse thing than what this man had gone through, 38 years of this incapacitating malady, and yet somehow or other there seems to be a backstory here that John doesn't give us the details of, but it does suggest that the man, either presently or in the past, is conducting himself in a way that puts him in some degree of peril. So Jesus says, don't sin, don't continue to sin, don't keep on in your present course, lest some worse thing befall you. It's a warning that, of course, should be taken seriously by anyone who reads with sobriety the Scriptures, that everything we find here is a warning against continuing in a way of life that might lead to some kind of consequence that would not be pleasant, would not be desirable, but would indeed be a kind of natural consequence of the choices that had been made.